What's going on, guys? My name's Jordan. I'm the head coach over here at SaberSim, and I wanted to record a quick video for you today walking through late swap in NBA DFS. Why late swap is so particularly important in daily fantasy basketball, as well as how to use SaberSim's powerful tools, simulations, and optimizer to late swap your NBA lineups quickly and effectively, making your lineups more profitable and more successful in your contests. I have quite a bit to get to here in this video, so let's go ahead and just dive right in. Now, if you've watched any of my other shows, content, or videos about NBA DFS, you've probably heard me at some point say that I think late swap is the biggest edge in NBA DFS. And why is that? There's three reasons why. The first is that news breaking in NBA is particularly impactful. In NBA DFS, because of the way players score points, there isn't really anything a player can do on the court to score a ton of points all at once. Giannis, for example, who is projected for about 59 points on tonight's slate, cannot go out there and in one play score half of his fantasy point projection, or even his entire fantasy point projection. In a sport like baseball or football or hockey, players can do that. They can hit a home run, they can score a touchdown, they can score a goal, and do these things on the actual field or ice and score most of their fantasy point projection and hit their upside potential in just a couple plays. There's nothing that Giannis can do like that, or any of these other players can do like that in NBA. So what that means is being on the court is very, very important to unlocking a player's upside. When a player gets surprise ruled into the starting lineup, or a player is suddenly ruled out that was questionable going into the slate, that vacates a lot of additional minutes for other players on the team, and players can quickly go from bad plays to good plays based on their projections and upside, purely because they're going to be on the court more, scoring more fantasy points, and delivering more upside to your lineups. Now, the second reason why late swap is so important in the NBA is because this news does break often. Not only is it very impactful to the optimal strategy of a slate when a player gets ruled out or when you have a starting lineup that's changed, but this happens all the time. On a typical NBA slate, you'll have probably quite a few questionable players heading into lock that are potentially going to get ruled out, but even outside of that, coaches will switch up their starting lineups often enough that it's worth checking, worth keeping an eye on this news, and you almost always, most NBA slates get an opportunity to adjust for news that you didn't have at lock. Now, the third and final reason for why late swap is so important in NBA DFS is because the field doesn't react to this news correctly. There are plenty of players still in the DFS ecosystem in 2023 that don't late swap at all. They either don't know what it is, they don't know how to do it, or they don't know how impactful it is, or think it's really only something that you do when you have an out player in your lineups, and that's going to be a huge boost to your lineups. You're reacting to information that is changing and updating throughout the night while your opponents aren't, which means your lineups are almost always going to be better, more profitable lineups in the long term. But even amongst the field that is reacting to news and is late swapping throughout the night, they're going to be fighting traditional optimizers to continue to build GPP-ready lineups throughout the night. Traditional optimizers don't understand anything but optimizing for the highest average projected score. To get them to build GPP-ready lineups, you have to rig them up with a bunch of rules and groups and different settings to make those lineups take into account things like correlation and ownership and the range of outcomes of players. And even if you're able to do that very effectively before lock, it's going to take some time to put all of that work in, and you don't have time when you're late swapping in NBA. Because this news can break so late, sometimes starting lineups are just coming out a couple minutes, 5-10 minutes before the start of the next game. You have to get that updated news, incorporate it into your process, but then also readjust all those rules and groups and settings that you programmed your optimizer with, all in just 5 to 10 minutes to take this information into account. There are DFS pros out there that get very, very good at this, but the average player is not going to be good at this, and that's really where SaberSim comes into play. When starting lineups come out, we run fresh simulations extremely quickly, sometimes even beating the originators of the news coming out for this news. And when you actually go to build your lineups and late swap your lineups, just like you get before lock, you're using an optimizer that directly leverages our simulations to take things into account like correlation, ownership fade, and also the diversity and volatility of players based on the contest you're playing. So SaberSim is extremely powerful at reacting to this news quickly and building GPP-ready lineups for you right out of the box. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into my NBA DFS late swap process and how I use SaberSim to get this done. So let's actually get into how to late swap as news is breaking throughout the night. Now, the first thing you want to do is once you enter your lineups at lock is understand when the different game lock times are throughout the night. How many different start times are there? When do you need to be prepared to react to updating news? So tonight, for example, there are 3 swap times for the 5-game slate at 5:30 my time, 6 o'clock, and 8 o'clock. So about 15 minutes or so before the starts of those games, I'm going to be prepared for starting lineups to come out and potentially change projections and require a swap. So what I am doing is around 5:15 tonight, I'll be checking here for the Lakers and Knicks game to see those starting lineups. Fortunately, we have this totally set up in our Discord server in the NBA lineup alerts channel. So you can see last night, for example, for the last game of the night, the Hawks and Blazers lineup, we got the Hawks lineup at 7:33 p.m. At 7:35, we immediately started running fresh simulations for this game here. We then got the Blazers lineup just a few minutes after that. Some additional sims ran, and our final projections for this game were updated at around 7:47, 13 minutes before the start of the game. So you want to keep an eye out for when these starting lineups are coming out and when our sims are running here to account for those starting lineups. In the app, when we've run what we think are our final sims for the game, pending additional news coming out, but at least the sims that account for the starting lineups, we will indicate that team has a confirmed starting lineup with a green check mark here by the team abbreviation, and also a green check mark by each of the starters. So what you want to do is you want to check here throughout the slate and make sure that when you are coming in to late swap, and rebuild your lineups that the teams in the next starting game here have a green check mark. So now let's say it's about 5:15 my time. We've gotten the Lakers and Knicks starting lineups. We've got the green check marks next to both teams and the sims have run to take into account the starting lineups. What's next? Well, the first thing you want to do is always check to see if this red flashing light or this lightning bolt here is flashing red. I'll show you what that will look like here. If we pretend that LeBron James gets surprise ruled out here, you're going to see this turn red and shake. And that means that there are players that are in your entries file in SaberSim that have since been ruled out. The best practice here is to click this and to immediately get these players out of your lineups. You'll have time to fully rebuild your lineups here in just a second, but you always want to make sure you don't get stuck with a 0. So what I'm going to do is if LeBron James gets ruled out, I'm going to tell SaberSim to replace him in all lineups that he appears with the next best available player. You can see this is going to fill in Julius Randle, Kawhi Leonard, DeMar DeRozan, Anthony Davis here. I'm going to download those and then re-upload those, in this case, to FanDuel. But now, not only do I want to make sure that LeBron is out, I want to make sure that I'm getting all of the new, better projected players that are playing in this game. If LeBron got ruled out, we would see a jump for all of these other players where their projections went up like this. Right, these are just examples here, but all of these other players would become good plays for the reasons I was talking about before, and we want to rebuild them now here and take that into account. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and start a new build. So in this case, you can start a late swap here just from the new build button. If it's during the slate, if we've detected that the slate is actually in progress, this will automatically default to a late swap. You can also turn the late swap on or off with this toggle in the upper right here. I'm getting a warning saying the slate hasn't started yet. That's okay, I still want a late swap. Then what I'm going to do is pick the contest that I want to swap. In this case, I'm going to just choose the only contest I'm registered here, but you can also break up your contests and swap them separately. For NBA, because you're typically under the gun and trying to do a lot of these swaps very quickly, as you're getting familiar with SaberSim, I would probably lean on the side of swapping all of your contests together and just doing it in one build. But as you get quicker and more comfortable with the tools, you can break these out here and swap, for example, your single entries and 3 maxes in one late swap and your 20 max and 150 max in a different late swap. But for now, I'm going to just do this here for this contest. We'll go ahead and pick any settings that we have here. In this case, this is a 150 max contest with about 48,000 entrants. And this is really where a lot of the magic happens, right? We're taking into account correlation and ownership and the range of outcomes of players without having to do that with a bunch of rules. So we can just get the new starting lineups, get the new sims, and rebuild our lineups effectively here. Now I'm going to late swap these lineups here. I'm going to rebuild my 15 lineups. And I'll give this just a minute to build here, and then we'll start the video back up. Okay, and you can see now here in this situation, this hypothetical where LeBron James got ruled out, we're now going to be getting to a bunch of Dennis Schroeder here, some Russell Westbrook, some Anthony Davis, some Hachimura, right? All guys that have very low ownership projections because so much of the field isn't swapping here or isn't swapping effectively. These guys are always going to come in lower owned than expected when this news breaks late. In this late swap build, this is where a lot of the magic happens, and really the value of this is that we don't just swap each lineup once. We give you multiple swap options for each original lineup, so you can edit exposures and make changes, anything you want to do post-build here in a lot of times the limited time you have. So in this particular case, I had 15 original lineups, but we built a pool of 500, which means each lineup in the pool has multiple different new versions that you can play instead. If you want to do things like cap exposure to a particular player, maybe you want to be a little bit under on Jalen Brunson here now, you can very easily just set those exposures and apply those changes here, and we'll sort through the pool of 500 swap options for you to find the best 15 swapped lineups that you can take with you into your contest. I recommend doing most of your late swap work here if you want to manage risk by adjusting exposures or by changing min uniques or take stands on different players. I recommend doing a lot of that here in the build screen. That's why the lineup pool exists. The best part of this is because you're building with the default settings that take into account correlation, ownership, and upside, you know that all of your different swap options here are going to be viable, good lineups, so you can quickly kind of mix and match and make changes to things on the fly in the last couple minutes that you have before you need to upload this entries file and be comfortable with what you ended up getting. Once you're happy with these lineups here, you'll go ahead and just download the new entries and then re-upload those, in this case, to FanDuel. This is an entries file. This will be totally ready to upload to the live tab on FanDuel or the edit entries page on DraftKings that you can just upload right into your site. So that's one swap. That's how I would handle the 5:30 p.m. game between the Lakers and Knicks tonight. I would do the same thing at 6 o'clock, but in this case, we have 2 games, 4 different teams. So I would wait, keep an eye on the starting lineups for each team, check the Discord channel to see if the sims are running and when the starting lineups are coming out. Once each team has a green check mark here, you should swap again for the 6 o'clock games. Now, I would still late swap your lineups here, even if you don't have the red flashing lightning bolt, and even if it doesn't look like very impactful news has broken. Those final sims that run when we get the starting lineup for each team are going to be our most accurate projections for those games, and even sometimes a player that is suddenly just projected to play a couple minutes more, maybe because some minor player that typically has a roll off the bench got ruled out or something like that, those can make actually a pretty big impact on player projections and upside, and you want to take that into account in your lineups. So I'm following that same process of coming on, checking to see if the teams have green check marks, doing the quick swap with the red lightning bolt if needed, and then running my late swap build before the start of each game. Now, a couple notes on this. I've done this for a long time, and my process for getting this done is extremely quick, but I don't want to push it right up against the start of games here and potentially miss a lock. Late swapping your lineups and reacting to news is extremely plus EV. Missing a game lock, or even worse, missing a lock and having a player that is out in your lineups, is extremely negative EV, so don't push it too close. These NBA coaches can be a big pain and sometimes will release starting lineups very, very late. So figure out how long it takes you to do your NBA late swap process, and then figure out what time you absolutely must start that process by, whether you have the news or not. For me, that's about 5, 6, 7 minutes before the start of the game. So if it's 5:53 and we're still missing, for example, the Bucks lineup for tonight, I'm just going to run the swap with the information I have and make sure I'm capturing the starting lineups from the other 3 teams and getting that swap in there. It's not worth waiting for one team and missing the opportunity to swap for the news from the other 3 teams just because you were waiting until the last second. And lastly, what should you do if you're running into issues, right? This can happen sometimes. You run your late swap build and either you're not getting the lineups that you wanted, or when you upload the entries file to the site, you're getting an error. The easiest things to do when that happens is to upload a new entries file and to reset your settings. So to upload a new entries file, you'll just go to the entries tab here and click upload new entries. Then you can click download template file from whatever site you're on. If it's DraftKings, that'll immediately go and download the file from DraftKings. On FanDuel, it'll bring you to this page here, and you can click CSV edit to download a new CSV and re-upload. This is going to fix the vast majority of issues here on SaberSim when you're late swapping. Most of the time, issues here are caused by your lineups on the site getting out of sync with what we have on SaberSim. So uploading a new entries file here is a great way to fix this. On that note, you don't need to upload a new entries file every time you're late swapping. When you download your entries from a late swap build, we save that entries file and assume that that's what you re-uploaded to the site, so we can track your entries throughout the night without you needing to upload a new entries file before every swap. But if you do run into issues, it's a very good idea to upload that new entries file just to make sure you're back in sync. If you're running the builds on SaberSim and you're having a hard time getting the lineups that you want, it's probably because rules, restrictions, or exposures that you've set on the home screen have become prohibitive or restrictive from building good lineups now with the news that is broken after lock. As players' games are locking, those players occupy positional spots and salary in your lineup, and you might not even be able to just get lineups that have a certain minimum exposure to a player you want, or lineup rules that you have set may no longer be possible based on the remaining spots and salary left in your lineup. If you're running into trouble, especially under the gun on time, the easiest thing to do is to just reset all your settings with this red reset in the upper right, which will reset all of your requested exposures, your lineup rules, all of that kind of stuff, and then restart a fresh late swap build on your fresh entries file in theory here, and then re-download and re-upload that, and everything should go through just fine. Now, if you've checked out this video here and you're not a SaberSim subscriber, we do have a free 7-day trial on our site, SaberSim.com, where you can come check us out, play with our NBA late swap tools, and also get to use our tools for all of our other sports for a free 7 days. And if you have any other questions about the rest of the late swap process on SaberSim, you can email us at support@sabersim.com. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching and good luck.